Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and today we're going to do another deck tech for Adventures into the Forgotten Realms, the D&D Dungeons & Dragons themed Magic the Gathering set that'll be coming out this week. We're just kind of brewing some decks that we want to try out on day one of set release. And what we have here is a Izzet deck built around the Floating Skull Demilich. It is a 4 blue, 4/3, that costs 1 blue mana less for each instance or sorcery spell that you cast this turn. When it attacks, you can exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard and copy it and then pay the mana for it. And you can also cast it from your graveyard by exiling 4 instants and sorceries along with paying its converted mana cost. So a really interesting design that I want to try out here. This card could be a lot better in Eternal formats where you have free stuff like Manamorphose, Gutshot, if Gitaxian Probe was still legal, kind of those topics. But what I put it in was kind of an Izzet Tempo Shell, kind of Izzet Spells. And what we're building around is like we have Sprite Dragon, we want to play a lot of spells, this scales up really well, as well as Stormwing Entity, another way to get it out. Prismari Command's really interesting in this deck because we can pitch copies of Demilich, we can fill our graveyard for both of its graveyard related abilities. It could also create treasures to kind of if you create a treasure that's kind of 2 spells in one that you're casting, so you get the treasure mana plus the Prismari Command mana, which is kind of sweet value. You have Expressive Iteration, which is great card advantage in these colors. So it's kind of like an Izzet Phoenix style list. We don't have Brainstorm or Faithless Looting in this version because it's standard, but this card could be pretty well suited for even like those Izzet Phoenix lists perhaps. We have a lot of 1 mana spells as well to pair with this. We have stuff like Opt and Crash Through, which are 1 mana, basically just replace themselves card draw. Opt giving us the Scry effect, Crash Through notably giving Trample. So if we have a big Sprite Dragon, or if we have a big Stormwing Entity, even Demilich just being 4 power, it's a way to trample through some damage. And then we have a removal package of Frostbites. We have a snow-based mana. Prismari Command can deal 2 damage, as well as some copies of Bone Crusher Giant. And lastly, because we're churning through a lot of cards with our deck, we have a lot of cheap spells. I usually like an Ox of Agonis in these types of lists. We can always pitch it to Prismari Command, and then escape it back for only 2 mana and refill our hands. We're okay if stuff like extra copies of Demilich go to the graveyard, we can always cast it there as well. If we look at the mana base, so I want to try out, so we have the snow-based mana. I hate the Snarls, so I generally never play the Snarls. They basically are just glorified tap lands unless you have them on turn 1 exactly. The Fjords meet our land conditions for snow lands, and they provide both colored mana. We have Riverglide Pathways, and then we have a couple Faceless Havens. The card I want to try out instead of the 4 copies of Faceless Haven, it's a little small, is one of the new creature lands from the set. This is Den of the Bugbear in the alternate D&D kind of style. But basically these lands come into play tapped if you have 2 or more lands, but it is a 4 mana creature you can activate. It creates red mana for us notably. And it's a 3/2 goblin that when it attacks, you create another goblin token, a 1/1 that's tapped and attacking as well. So it's an interesting kind of approach. This deck itself doesn't have as, like, it's really just the Demilich and the land from the new set. Izzet didn't really get powered up too much in this set in terms of playable spells, I would think. A lot of the red spells do kind of lend themselves to kind of the treasure theme or kind of like weird pump spells or like roll. A lot of the red cards are like the D20 themed cards, which I don't think are very playable outside of draft where you have those kind of volume of spells. The one card to consider perhaps as well is that 3 mana discard a card, draw 2, create a treasure. I forgot that the name's eluding me right now. That's another option that you can pitch copies of Demilich, just gets you ahead, it gets mana. But I think this is a really good start. Your sideboard, I just build these as best of ones just as the start. I usually like to test like that to see if it's kind of the thought process is there. Your sideboards are usually something that you build later, kind of knowing what the meta is. But your sideboard would include stuff like counter spells, mystical disputes, negates, disdainful strokes perhaps. There might be consideration for Brazen Borrower. I would include some more burn spells. There's the new burn spell that like Fire Hands or Hot Hands, 2 damage for 2 mana, but if you're targeting a green creature, it does 6 damage. A very good card there for like your Gargaroths, your Lovestruck Beast, stuff like that. You can do Scorching Dragonfire, you can do Soul Seer, you can do a Cronin War. There is even the potential, like in the grindier matchups, like Control or something like that. The new 4 mana Red Planeswalker to just keep making tokens. Still new in the set. The names kind of elude me at this point, but that's probably where I'd start off. It's kind of a tempo. If you like Phoenix in historic, modern, pioneer, whatever format Phoenix runs around, it's probably something to consider. A lot of these cards, like Expressive Iteration, Sprite Dragon, I think Prismari Command to some extent, Stormwing Entity, all see play in these more eternal formats. We don't have anything like I said, like Manamorphose or the cheap spells, or the free spells, but definitely something to try out. Let me know what you think. If you do have any cool deck ideas, suggestions, stuff like that, we'll be trying out a bunch of decks. The set comes out Thursday. I'll be live and doing a bunch of decks and gameplay on Friday. Took the day off work, so we'll be jamming then. But I hope to catch you there. And as always, if you can, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.